William Wordsworth was an English poet. He was born April 7, 1770 in Cockermouth, Cumberland, England. As one of the first, and most likely the greatest of the English Romantic poets, he redirected the literary trends of his time. His most important poems present a vision of the expanded human mind in creative play with the outside world. Wordsworth was born on the borders of the Lake District in northwest England. William Wordsworth was the second of 5 children born to John and Anne Wordsworth. His mother died when he was 8, and when he was 9 he was sent to Hawkhead's Grammar School, which was 35 miles south on the shores of Esthwaite Lake. Wordsworth loved the lakeside country, where he was free to roam for long periods, and he later includes this in The Prelude, or The Growth of a Poet's Mind, published in 1850. He was an adventurous, imaginative, strong-minded, and rebellious boy who was also given to periods of solitude. Wordsworth had a happy childhood despite the fact that both of his parents died when he was young, and he was an orphan by age 13. Wordsworth entered St. John's College in Cambridge in 1787, but he wasn't well accepted because it was said that his clothes were plain and unsophisticated, and he had an awkward manner, and he didn't excel as a scholar or fit in smoothly in fashionable social circles. He later wrote in The Prelude that he believed that he was not for that hour nor for that place, but at the time he had no clear idea of his vocation. During his summer vacation in 1790, Wordsworth went on a walking tour with his friend Robert Jones through France and the Alps. The following year, after receiving his degree from Cambridge, he climbed Mount Snowdon, the highest peak in Great Britain. It was an important event because he would later incorporate the story of the climb, giving it great symbolic importance in the final book of The Prelude. In November 1791, Wordsworth returned to France, where the French Revolution was at its height. Stimulated by his friendship with a Republican soldier, Wordsworth enthusiastically embraced the revolutionary cause, later writing of France standing on top of golden hours and human nature seeming born again. Wordsworth also had a love affair with a French woman, Annette Ballin, from Orleans, who later gave birth to his child Caroline. He returned to England in December 1792, and 1 month later published his first poetry. Wordsworth seems to have a lot of artistic interests, including enjoying the lakeside and climbing the tallest mountain in England and others such as that. But the most important one and significant one seems to be his passion for democracy. It's the result of his 2 youthful trips to France. In November 1791, he returned to France, where he attended sessions of the National Assembly. In December, he met and fell in love with Annette Ballin, and at the beginning of 1792, he became close friends of an intellectual and philosophical army officer, Michael Bupoy, with whom he discussed politics. He had been an instinctive Democrat since childhood, and his experiences in revolutionary France strengthened and developed his convictions. His sympathy for ordinary people would remain with Wordsworth even after his revolutionary fervor had been replaced with the softened feudalism he endorsed in his 2 addresses to the freeholder of Westmoreland in 1818. While still in France, he began to work on his first extended poetic efforts of his maturity, Descriptive Sketches, which was published in 1793 after the appearance of a poem written at Cambridge, An Evening Walk, 1793. Having exhausted his money, he left France in early December 1792 before Annette gave birth to his child Caroline. Back in England, the young radical cast about for a suitable career. As a fervent Democrat, he had serious reservations about vegetating in paltry curacy, though he had written to William Matthews from France in May 1792 that he intended to be ordained the following winter or spring. Perhaps this was why he was reading sermons early in 1793. In December 1799, following a brief visit to Germany with Coleridge, Wordsworth and Dorothy moved to Dove Cottage in Lake District village of Grassmere. Coleridge and his wife followed them to a nearby town. The Wordsworth were to live in Dove's cottage for 10 years, it was to be the most creative period of the poet's life. This was in part a result of the serenity and happiness of domestic life at Dove's cottage. Dorothy was a devoted helper, and Wordsworth's marriage to his childhood friend in 1802 increased his tranquility. It was an ideal environment for writing. During this period, Wordsworth completed an early version of the Prelude, planned a long-term title, The Recluse. Wordsworth's first poem, Descriptive Sketches and An Evening Walk, were printed in 1793. He wrote several pieces over the next several years. The year 1797 marked the beginning of Wordsworth's long friendship with Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Together they published lyrical ballads. In 1798, Wordsworth wanted to challenge the gaudiness and inane phraseology of many modern writers. Most of his poems in this collection center on the simple yet deeply human feelings of ordinary people phrased in their own language. Wordsworth's most memorable contribution to this volume was lines composed a few miles above Tintern Abbey, which he wrote just in time to include it. This was the first major piece to illustrate his original talent at its best. Wordsworth had some popular poems in the middle period as well. The Ruined Cottage, later referred to as The Peddler, it was intended to form part of a vast philosophical poem with the title The Recluse, or Views of Man, Nature, and Society. This grand project never materialized as originally planned. Before 1802, Wordsworth liked to center stuff around nature, but after 1802, he turned to a more calm doctrine set of Orthodox Christianity. He was criticized a lot for changing and focusing more on Christianity later on, but it led to one of his most popular poems, The Prelude, which is said to be the most outstanding achievement of English Romanticism. He worked on it on and off for several years and completed the first version in May 1805. The Prelude can claim to be the only true romantic epic because it deals in narrative terms with the spiritual growth of the only true romantic hero, the poet. The inward odyssey of the poet was described not for its own sake, but as a sample and as an adequate image of a man at his most sensitive. William Wordsworth has written 387 poems. He wrote them from the year 1790 to 1850, including the collection Lyrical Ballads, which he wrote with Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and The Prelude. English literature scholars credit Wordsworth with starting English Romantic movement. The older Wordsworth got, the more his poetic vision and inspiration dulled. His later, more rhetorical, moralistic poems cannot be compared to the ones of his early ages. A number of them are mainly made great just because of how good he was in the beginning. Between 1814 and 1822, his publications included The Excursion, that was in 1814, a continuation of The Prelude, but lacking the power and beauty of that work, The White Doe of Rylstone, 1815, Peter Bell, 1819, and Ecclesiastical Sonnets, 1822. Yarrow Revisited and other poems appeared in 1835, but after that, Wordsworth wrote little more. Among his other poetic works are The Borderers, a tragedy, published in 1842, Michael, published in 1800, The Recluse, published in 1800, and Laodamia, published in 1815, and Memorials of a Tour of the Continent, 1822. Wordsworth also wrote the prose works of Convention of Cintra, 1809, and a description of the scenery of the lakes in North England, 1810, republished with additions in 1822. Much of his easy flow of conversation blank verse has true lyrical power and grace, and his finest work is permeated by a sense of the human relationship to external nature that is religious and in its scope and intensity. To Wordsworth, God was everywhere manifest in the harmony of nature, and he felt deeply the kinship between nature and the soul of humankind. The tide of critical opinion turned in his favor after 1820, and he lived to see his work universally praised. In 1842, he was awarded a government pension, and in the following year, he succeeded Southey as Poet Laureate. Wordsworth died at Rydal Mount, April 23, 1850, and was buried in the Grasmere churchyard. According to Wordsworth, the poet is viewed as a seer, and poetry itself, according to him, is the first and last of all knowledge, and it is as immortal as the heart of man.